Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Joshua. I'm going to be your presenter today. We're here to talk about the check designer function that we have now in our new payroll program. Before we get into that topic, again, welcome to everybody. It is promptly noon Eastern time. Okay, so I do have some checks in payroll waiting in the print queue. So you can access the check designer either while you're, posting your payroll, calculating it, and then printing your checks, or you can access it other ways through, say, your reprint check stubs as well. I'm going to say no on this prompt right now because I want to show you where those are. So what I'm talking about is when we go right here to the right where it says print checks, you're given two options. First run checks. So if you have payroll checks that are created but not yet, or payroll that's been posted but the checks have not been printed, you can choose first run checks, or you can access the check designer through the reprint stubs as well. Okay, so even if you have one payroll run where check numbers have been assigned or printed, you can choose reprint stubs, and when I bring that up, I can choose any one of my pay dates that I have in this list. Doesn't matter which one. Go to next. No check number is assigned. I go to next again, and notice right here I've got my check designer button to the right. So one of the reasons why I'm kind of showing you this, and I'll go back to the other one where we're going to be actually doing the checks to print checks themselves, is in this list, folks, we have two layouts: template check stub, and template default payroll check. Okay, Church Windows Payroll, like accounting, supports only two check styles. One check per page with two stubs. So it's either checked on top with a stub, and then or the three-part check with the check in the middle, the check stub on top, the stub on the bottom, and the check in the middle. One of those stubs, of course, is for the church's record, and one is to be given or be included or attached to the check that you then present to your employee. Okay, so the software doesn't support any other check styles at all. Check stub, and default payroll check, which is the check stub layout. Okay, these templates are hard-coded in here, folks. These cannot be overwritten or deleted. But it's important that you know that. You always have those to fall back on. All right? Payroll is the same, or accounting is the same way. Only supports the three-part check with one check stub, or check stub. Payroll is no different. Basically, we believe that probably the same checks you're using for accounting can probably be used for your payroll checks as well. Okay? Let's cancel out of that, and let's go back to our print checks, and let's choose print first run checks. So here's our checks waiting to print for our Huntington Bank checking account. I would enter my starting check number that I'm wanting for my checks just like I would normally. Click next. And here we are back at our print checks with our check layout and our check designer. Okay. So again, while I do have other layouts in here from data that we've restored, the default templates are still here down at the very bottom. Hopefully everybody can see those. I'm kind of toggling back and forth between those. Most folks will use the check stub, but maybe some of you do have the check stub format. Of course, the bottom stub would be for the church's record, and the middle one would be to go with the check to the employee. For the purposes of our webinar, though, we're going to use the default payroll check layout. Okay, we simply choose that, and we simply go to the right to the check designer button. Again, so I guess one of the things I'm trying to point out about that is you don't need to have payroll checks waiting in the print queue in order to be able to get into the designer and to be able to manipulate or edit your layout. Okay, you can just go right into those reprint check stubs as long as you've got one set of checks that have been printed and assigned, numbers have been assigned to it, you can use it there as well. Okay. Yeah, and of course, as it states on my document here that I've written up for this, is you can, of course, get to the check designer if we do have checks waiting to print, okay? So again, just be aware that the limitation of the two layouts, check stub and check stub, okay? So we chose the preferred layout, and we went to check designer, all right? So here we are. Folks, look at this. And the window that opened now is called Payroll Check Designer. And this designer function, folks, is all over the software. You've got it under custom reports and membership. You've got it under statement designer in donations for your giving statements. We've got it under accounting for accounting checks, accounts payable checks, even under your accounts receivable invoices and statements as well. So this designer function is everywhere, and it functions all exactly the same way. Folks open this window and all of a sudden they're like, wow, I'm really intimidated by this, okay? So here's why I encourage you to kind of just take a deep breath, calm down about it, is it won't let you break the defaults, the templates, okay? You will always have the templates to fall back on, all right? So it's never, you're always going to be able to go back to this exact layout. If you drop the ball and you make a bunch of mistakes and you go, oh, well, I don't want this, you can always scrap the one you created and then start over again with one of the templates, okay? So just, take a deep breath, calm down. You'll have the defaults to go back to, okay? You're not breaking anything that you can't go back right to the very edge again and start over, all right? So the first thing about this is, the thing about the check designer or the designer function in general, whether it's payroll checks or any place else, is red is bad. Okay, so if I pick up my miscellaneous tax detail and I move that up, notice there I've got red now showing up under the top stub. That's bad. Why? Well, because I could have information in each one of those sub-reports, my local tax detail 1 and my miscellaneous tax detail 1, that could be overlapping and printing goofy, or it could be simply not printing one of them, based on how that's set up. Most likely it would probably just print information. So just keep in mind, red is not good, all right? So if you've got red, you're potentially creating problems with printing, and printing may show up as goofy if you've got something in red, all right? So just be aware, red is something you've got to deal with. Now I should be able to fix this simply by picking up that field and dragging it back down. Notice the lines appear, and sure enough, I'm now back to the sub-report, miscellaneous tax detail sub-report, now being no longer overlapping the local tax sub-report. These sub-reports are basically detail sections that show all of the complex breakdown that occurs on your payroll checks. So, right at the top, you've got your organization name and address, your employee name, the pay date, pay period ended, check number, net pay amount, and then we've got our pay rates and hours detail. You've got your pay summary sub-report. You've got your allowance detail. You've got your deduction detail sub-report, local tax, miscellaneous tax, and paid time off or PTO summary, okay? These payroll check stubs are enormously complex, okay? And I, having done this as long as I have, I just remind folks, there's only so much real estate on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So, we're trying to fit in a bunch of information on these stubs. So you've kind of got to exert some caution about, where and how you manipulate these things, okay? You can always resize anything. I can, click my miscellaneous tax, and I can just put my cursor over the edges and notice I just shrunk up that field. I can also change anything about these sizes of these. I can make them larger. I can make them smaller. I can take them off entirely. If you have no miscellaneous taxes in your state, more of these things in the states that are popping up that are not federal, state, or local taxes, they're miscellaneous taxes, remove that. You simply highlight it, hit the delete key on your keyboard, boom, that miscellaneous tax sub-report detail is now gone, okay? I've only removed it, though, from the top stub, not the bottom. So if I wanted to remove it, I'd have to go down here and do the same thing on my bottom stub as well, okay? You can literally, folks, pick up things and drag them around on here, all right? All of the controls in terms of these reports and sub-reports and everything that's listed under the detail on the left is detailed or available under our standard controls to the very far right. I'm sorry, folks, I don't have any drawing tools here to kind of show you how this works to steer focus. But if you look on the very right side of my screen, I've got standard controls, pointer, label, logo. You can import a logo, folks, or an image and put it on your checks if you want. Shapes, information, then data controls, organization info fields, data fields, and then report detail reports. See, now down here we've got under detail reports, pay rate, hours detail. That's what's up here. And then our pay summary, which is the pay summary 2. allowance details. So all of this information, if I go, oh, well, my state now is implementing a miscellaneous tax, I can just come into the check designer and pick up the miscellaneous tax detail, drag it over there, and just redrop it back into the check, okay, or into the stub. It is that simple, okay? Again, full control here, okay? But just keep in mind, lots of information. All right, so a big question that comes up a lot of times through support, okay? So let me just show you folks. If I don't like what I've done, I can always just close out of it and it'll ask, do I want to save my report or not? Before I do that though, very important feature as part of this payroll check designer function here, okay, is I'm going to take off the miscellaneous tax detail just because I want to show you. So down here in the bottom left corner, do you see where we've got the 1 to 2 buttons, one that says designer and then another one to the right of that that says preview. When you're working in this, folks, you're going to be working between the designer and the preview tab a lot, okay? So right here I'm under the designer. If I go, okay, I'm ready now to, see what this looks like. I don't have to save this, close out, and then print a check. I can go right to the preview tab, and it says it's not possible to show the selected subreport font in the sub preview. Arial 8 will be used. Okay, we're fine. So we now jumps over, and we've created a sample check with just sample data in here that you can use to print to a plain sheet of paper and overlay it over one of your checks. Okay, so I would simply now go up to the print icon in the upper left. We would send this to a printer, print it to a plain sheet of paper. You would overlay it over one of your actual physical checks of your check stock, okay? And then overlay it, hold, the old-fashioned, hold it up to the light and see how it aligns. You don't want to waste any unnecessary check stock, okay? And then you look at it, you hold it up, you go, oh, I've still got some more, changes or edits or manipulation I need to do. You now just toggle back to the designer tab and then make your desired changes and then go back to the preview tab and do the same thing, okay? So no need to leave this window in order for it to determine how it's going to align with your checks. That designer and preview tab is on all of the designer functions everywhere in Church Windows. Not just payroll, membership, donations, accounting, everywhere, okay? So one of the things that I was going to state earlier was one of the common questions we get about this is, well, my date and my net pay amounts don't align with my check, all right? And so what we're talking about here is on our format, we've got the stub on the top and the bottom and the check in the middle. So right here's my date, and right to the right of it is my net pay, all right? So depending on how yours is, all right, you can literally just pick up these fields and drag them. So if you go, okay, I need to move my date down, it is literally that simple, folks, okay? You can pick up these fields. You can change the size of them. You can do anything you want with them. But it could be that simple as just picking it up. This, what I'm about ready to share with you now, is a very commonly overlooked function as part of the designer feature. If you don't need to move these fields very much, and notice how you just kind of got the snap to grid icon on it, it tells me with these lines when it actually aligns perfectly with my net pay, okay? And so here's the other thing. If you use your control key and your up and down or left and right arrows, so let's say I hold down my control key, notice now how if I just keep hitting my down arrow, notice that it's shifting my net pay amount down really incrementally. So if you don't need to move it very much, and your drag and drop may be giving you fits with regards to that, use that control and your arrow keys. I can use left or right or up and down. I can do any of that with those keys, all right? So let's say I now need to, so it's now got it vertically there, it's got that there, it's not moving it, but it should now pop in. There it is. There, now it's aligned with my net pay amount. It's got those lines. Now I would go back to my preview tab. Here I would just simply, again, print it to a plain sheet of paper, overlay it over one of my checks, and hold it up to the light. Make sure I'm not burning any check stock unnecessarily, all right? And again, you'll just keep going back and forth between the designer and the preview tab until you have it aligned up with your check exactly the way that you want it. My story is, and I'm sticking to it, is as long as it's a 3-part check, you should be able to use this designer to get these payroll checks to align exactly with the check stock that you're using. Really, I'm not kidding. Call us, folks, if you need help with it. But there's no fear in this because, again, if I now go back, all right, and if I go, okay, my date and net pay now align perfectly in my checks where I want them to go. And let me show you one more thing before we do that. If I go, okay, my written amount is, up here in the top left, you've got all the controls. You've got your bold and your underline. You've got your alignment. You've got all of these controls up here. But let's say my written dollar amount is not left justified. It's right justified. I click on that field. I go right up here and I hit the right justify, and looky there. The written amount now justifies right, not left. Could be that simple. We're going to move it back to the left because that really is probably left justified. Okay. If you on the preview tab or preview of the sample check, you want to print it to an actual physical check, you may certainly do so, but I personally wouldn't, checks can be expensive, certainly now, and I would not necessarily want to waste a check unnecessarily if I didn't have to, and maybe several, depending on how you do it, okay? But notice that miscellaneous tax detail in the lower right corner of both stubs is now gone as well, okay? Yeah, and somebody had just suggested in comments that you could also just make a copy of the check too. So just print a copy of it through your copier, print it to that, and see how it aligns as well. Thank you, Roberta, very helpful. So now if I go, okay, it's printed now correctly, I can either go up to Save As or Save, or I can go up to the X in the upper right corner. All right, if I click on the X, it's going to pop up and ask me to enter a name for my layout. If I try to save it with the word template in there, it's going to bark at me. Notice, red dot, cannot overwrite this file. So your templates, the template default payroll check and the check stub are always going to be there. I have to at least get the name template out of that. All right. I typically recommend naming it something more specific, like my church checks, payroll checks, or, maybe the acronym for your church name, with the word payroll and payroll checks in it, and then once you do that, then click save or okay or yes through that. So it's now, notice it's defaulted to selecting that check layout. Now I can go back and I can actually then enter my check numbers and go to my print checks and print them, and the changes will have been made or saved to my checks. But if I had said no to that save, it would have just gone right back to the template default payroll check. No changes would have been saved. So you've got to give it a unique name each time, and double check, folks, to make sure that whatever name you've given it is the one that's being selected when you're actually physically printing, preparing to print your checks. Okay. You may also delete unwanted layouts, not the defaults, not the templates. You can't delete those. I'm pretty sure if I highlight that and try clicking, it's going to go, yep, template check stub is permanent layout and cannot be deleted. That's good. But I can go down to mine that I've created. I forget what I named that, folks. Sorry. I think I called that default check layout. It'll be up here under D's maybe. Where is it? Default payroll check. There it is. Highlight it, click delete. It'll say, are you sure you want to permanently delete default payroll check? If I click yes, that'll be gone. Okay. So we've gone a minute long, folks. That is where I'm going to leave this today.